Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast, part of the Bet Rivers Network. A lot going on right now. A little bit of a smorgasbord as far as news of the day. Let's get to a couple of things. First, of course, the two big baseball signings. Diaz goes to the Dodgers. I think this was a missed opportunity for both the Mets and the Yankees. If I were the Mets, now the Mets supposedly made a very realistic offer. That's fine, but I don't know why they wouldn't go the extra mile for Diaz, who I think they needed in the worst way. I also think if the Mets were going to allow Diaz to move on, I think the Yankees should have been there and should have been there in a big way. I think he would have been a welcome addition. I would love him as the closer next year for the Yankees. Now, there's a lot of talk that he wanted to go to the Dodgers. I mean, Dodgers, let's be honest, has become baseball heaven for a lot of players. Great weather, movie stars, championships. What else can you ask for? Big stars in the lineup, exciting baseball every night. They've become what the Yankees used to be. They've become the big rock star. You know, if you go back into the 90s, into the 2000s, the Yankees were the rock stars of baseball. They were enormous stars back in the days, pre-A-Rod, back in the days with Bernie and Jeter and Mariano and Andy and on and O'Neill, etc. That, you know, wonderful team that won championship after championship, including 14 straight World Series games. Obviously, the A-Rod years were incredibly tumultuous, produced one championship. It's been very, very slim picking since, but the Yankees have allowed the Dodgers to use their resources and play the game at an aggressive and expensive and very, very impressive level. And it's producing championships, and they get what they want. And it seems like players, if they have a chance, want to run to play and be part of that Dodger show right now. And Diaz obviously had multiple offers. Our understanding, he had a very good offer from the Mets, but he goes to the Dodgers on a 3-year contract. And I think it's a big loss for the Mets. I think it's a big loss for the Yankees. I think they were both had opportunities to keep him in New York. Maybe he wanted to go to LA. I don't know. But that's where he is. So today, a big move. Diaz goes to the Dodgers and makes them even better and makes them an even bigger favorite for next year. Schwarber retained by the Phillies is, to me, no surprise. I never thought that he wanted to leave Philadelphia. I think he has found a home there. To me, the contract makes sense. The whole part of it makes sense. I always thought he would go back there. I did not think he was coming to the Mets. I did not think he was going to go to a team like a Cincinnati or a Pittsburgh or someplace where he was going to relish, where he was a borderline contender. And since he dwell in the deep recesses of Pittsburgh, I didn't think that was going to happen. So I'm not surprised at all that he goes back to the Phillies. Now, a lot of buzz that Mattingly is going to join the coaching staff in Philadelphia. Good for him. If that's where Donnie Baseball lands, I'm glad for him. So kudos. You're hearing that a lot. As far as the Mets, I've been saying this for weeks. Stearns is not a huge Alonso fan. We know that. He also is a big believer that a defensively challenged right-handed slugger at his age is going to deteriorate quickly. There is a bias against right-handed first basemen as they get older. There always has been. My understanding has been all along that the Mets know, and that Pete knows, the Mets will only go 3 years. They will not go past 3 years on a contract. Maybe they can get the money up to entice him at 3 years. I doubt it. I think it's much more likely that Pete goes to the Red Sox or the Orioles or somebody like that than he does back to the Mets. I really believe that's the case. Now it's going to leave the Mets with a big power void. So they have work to do. There's no question, and they have to make a big signing. And I would be surprised if they don't. I'd be very surprised if they don't. We're early in the process. We've just seen a couple players come off the board, and the word that you've been hearing in this very, very painfully slow process that baseball produces. Baseball signings are they drip out, as you know. Unlike the other sports, they drip out. In football, there's like 9,000 the first 2 days, and it's over. It comes quickly in the other sports. It does not come quickly in baseball. It is tedious and it drips out, and that's the case again. But everyone felt once Schwarber goes that people will start to move. So we'll see if that's the case as things start to unfold. Now, I mentioned Mattingly probably going to the Philly staff. Phillip Rivers, who at 44 can still throw the ball. The question is, can he move? The question is, can he sustain a hit? How fast can he get up to speed and actually play? I don't know, but it sounds like he has been signed by the Colts. Sounds like he will be in uniform this week as the number 2 quarterback. At least that seems to be the plan right at the moment. But he has been signed at 44 years of age, 5 years out of the game. Has signed a contract with the Colts, which, hey, if you lose quarterbacks and they lost both their starter and their backup, that it's slim pickings this time of year. You have to get somebody who does not have, is not, part of another team. You can't get a player from another team unless they're on waivers. It's not easy to get a quarterback right now. So somebody would have to release one and then put him out and allow him to get picked up. That's the only way it could happen, and that obviously hasn't happened for the Colts. So they go out into retirement and grab Phillip Rivers, who was in his day, a very talented quarterback. Not the best, but a very talented quarterback in his own right. I want to get to a couple of things, but before I do, I promised that I would get to some emails. We're trying to do that because they've been really piling up. So they've been asking me to get to a couple of shows and take at least a handful of emails for some shows. Remember, you can send me emails at MikeFrancesapodcast@gmail.com. Now, a couple things. Sign up for the free Mike Francesa newsletter. You get exclusive content, contests, other goodies, especially at Christmas time. Go to MikeFrancesapodcast.com and sign up absolutely free. Bet Rivers players who place a same-game parlay of at least $10 on NFL or NCAA football games will receive an entry into the weekly Squares game. Winning Squares can earn up to $50 bonus bets per entry. See the Bet Rivers app or website for full details. There's been a lot of talk about 2 veteran quarterbacks who have long tenures with their teams. One is Tomlin. The other is John Harbaugh. I think that Tomlin will be back with the Steelers next year. Now, if this year does not end the way the Steelers hope, which they hope it ends with a playoff and maybe even, something good in the playoffs, maybe Tomlin asks out. There is a relationship, clearly, as everybody knows, a very, very strong relationship. The Rooneys and the Maras are almost like one big family, and they have been for generations. They're intermarried. As you know, Chris Mara is married to a Rooney. His 2 daughters were both prominent actresses. Kate Mara, Rooney Mara. Get it? Rooney Mara. Okay. So they are intermarried as families. They have been very close forever. They have been 2 of the foundation families of the NFL, 2 of the most prominent by far. They go back, virtually 100 years apiece in the game. So anything that would happen between the Steelers and the Giants would not surprise anybody because of the relationship between the 2 franchises. It's unique, to say the least. Be that the case, I still think Tomlin will be the Steeler coach next year. The John Harbaugh thing has started to get traction. Now, that's not because of irate fans or anything else who haven't been satiated. Their owner's a little different. I could see a case where he might think it's time for a change, just to shake things up. Not that John Mara has done the job for him, but that it's time for a change. If that happens, the Giants should pounce on John Mara. I mean, on John Harbaugh. Pounce on John Harbaugh without a question. It shouldn't take them 10 minutes to make the phone call. He is a very good coach. I don't care what the fan base, which is thinks that they deserve championships because of their quarterback. Okay, it's not just as easy as putting a quarterback there and winning championships. He hits the market. That should be an automatic pickup. Now, the candidacy of Freeman and his NFL candidacy has started to gain a lot of traction, especially since what happened with Notre Dame the last couple of days. There is no question he is going to be an attractive NFL candidate. He has been quietly the last year or two. Notre Dame has said they would go to great lengths, and they mean that financially, to keep him. And Notre Dame does not like to throw money around. They like to make money with both hands, but they do not like to throw it around. They like to keep it. So it's not always been their way to be the most, spend happy group. I would say it's more likely he stays than he leaves, but I would not. Someone is going to make a run at him. I don't think there's any question. He is not any more of a guarantee than any defensive or offensive coordinator in the NFL would be. Just because he's had success in college does not make him a bona fide veteran head coach like a Harbaugh would be. So you cannot put him in that classification. Yes, he's a head coach. Yes, he has been a successful head coach. But that means he is bright. He is a leader of men. We understand all that. I don't have any issue with any of that. From that standpoint, I think he checks certain boxes for the Giants. But he is not a given on any stretch. To me, John Harbaugh is a given. You get him, you're automatically going to get better in a hurry. So I don't put Freeman into that group. And as far as the Notre Dame stuff, it's almost tiring because people come into two camps. They either despise Notre Dame or they love Notre Dame. There's very little middle ground with Notre Dame. There never has been. I see these people who say Notre Dame, they're not important anymore. Well, that's just stupid. Okay. Now, does Notre Dame have the impact on college football that it had in the days of Ara Parseghian? No. It's a different world now. But to say that Notre Dame does not have unique powers and unique drawing abilities is just outrageously wrong. Last year, the highest rated quarterfinal game was the Notre Dame playoff game. The semifinal game was the highest rated of the two, and the final game, of course, did an enormous number. But that's a final game. We understand there's only one standalone game. They're capable of drawing a very solid audience against any opponent, even a nothing opponent. Other colleges can't do that. They can because their following is that unique. They're the only team that plays every game on national TV. You've heard me say that forever. They're the only team in the history of American sport who has ever done that. Their least important games always went no further than ESPN. That was the lowest stage. It was a home game. It was on NBC. Most of the time, if it was them on the road, ABC picked it up. And if ABC didn't pick it up, then ESPN picked it up. All national televised, every one of them. Now you're into a different world with streaming and everything else, but they get visibility that no other franchise, nobody in the NFL gets every one of their games coast to coast. It does not happen. There are maps for anything except primetime games. There are maps. No 1 o'clock game is on to 100% of the country. No 4 o'clock game is on to 100% of the country, except if it is a standalone game, maybe late in the season. There's always a side game that might be getting 2% or 4% or 8% of the country, but they're still getting part of the country. They get the entire country. To say they do not have a unique brand and they don't have a unique drawing ability is just outrageously wrong. Now, did they get screwed here? Hey, answer this question. Are they one of the best 12 teams in the country? It's not disputable. They might be one of the 6 best teams in the country or 7 best teams in the country. If I was picking right now and I was putting the teams together, I would say Ohio State's 1, Indiana's 2. Georgia, if you want to put them 3, I'd put Texas Tech 3 and Georgia 4. That's how much I think of Texas Tech. You know, I've been loving them all year. After that, Notre Dame slides in anywhere from 5. They're every bit as good as Oregon. 6, 7, anywhere in there. They're anywhere as good as any one of those teams, and maybe better than some of them. So the question is twofold. One, why were there weekly rankings that had Notre Dame ahead of Miami week after week after week until the final week? That was so unfair to Notre Dame, was ridiculous. They had been ahead of them every single week. Number 2, there is no steadfast rules that they gave on how they were going to treat the other conference champions. The ACC thing probably finished Notre Dame and ACC. I think Notre Dame and ACC could be finished. That's how bad things are right now between Notre Dame and the ACC. Remember, that's only for other sports. Remember, Notre Dame is very good in some other sports. They're a championship team in lacrosse. They're very good in women's basketball. And they might be good in a couple other intercollegiate sports that I don't know about. And they need to have a place for their other sports to play. But they will never share their TV money. It's not happening for football. It's never happened. It won't happen. I've always said 2 things were steadfast, and I've been saying that for 40 years, and it's still true. The 2 things you would not see, and I'm still here, and we haven't seen either one of them. Number 1, I said there would never be a hard cap in Major League Baseball. I still don't believe there ever will be. Number 2, I said you'd never see Notre Dame join a conference in football, and I still think you will not. And you haven't to this day. I remember seeing stories 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Notre Dame has to join a conference. I said they'll never join. They still haven't joined. They won't join. They won't share their TV money. Not going to happen. So you can go on hating them. And half the country thinks they got screwed this year. And you can make a very good case as they did. And half the country thinks they should be quiet and go away. And you can make a case for that too. So, and you know where it comes down? Whether you like or hate Notre Dame, which I believe is 2 enormous camps. And neither is objective in any way. All right, let's get to some emails. Remember, send me the emails at Mike Francesa podcast at gmail.com. Let's see what's on your mind today. This is from Greg. Of the two beloved New York ball players not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, if you were the deciding vote for only one of them, this is great because I got to, hear from one of them, I have a good relationship with both of them. We're talking about obviously Mattingly and Hernandez. Um, first of all, I hate this stuff with the Hall of Fame. I always have. Number one, I've always considered myself a very hard Hall of Fame marker. I think the Hall of Fame is for people who were no-brainers. If you have to just sit down and say, is this guy a Hall of Famer? Pretty much he's not, because you shouldn't have to say that. You should say this guy is an automatic Hall of Famer. That's what the Hall of Fame is about. It's about those people. It's not about these marginal guys that they sneak in through the Veterans Committee. It's very close as ball players. I'll answer the question, though. If you put a gun to my head, I would put Mattingly ahead of Hernandez for this reason. Mattingly at one time was the best player in the American League. Now, they both won MVPs. They both were brilliant fielders. Keith was generational in his fielding. Mattingly was brilliant in his fielding. Mattingly had immense more power than Keith did, and he was a better hitter. Keith was a better fielder. Mattingly was a better hitter, and a more powerful hitter. Mattingly had Triple Crown kind of talent as a hitter, until his back went. And if not for his back going, he would have been a walk-in Hall of Famer. Mattingly, at one point, I believe, was the best player in the American League. I don't think Keith ever was the best player in the National League. And if you're Hernandez, you have to weigh his defensive stats at first base so heavily to get him in the Hall of Fame, it doesn't work. Because if you look at his lifetime numbers, he's not a 300 hitter. And if you're going to get in the Hall of Fame, you don't get in as a 300 hitter. If your guy doesn't hit home runs, and Keith didn't hit home runs, then you got to be Tony Gwynn or Wade Boggs to go to the Hall of Fame, or Rod Carew. And he didn't hit home runs. And Mattingly didn't have enough great years because of his back issues. If Mattingly's back had held up for 3 more seasons, he would have been a walk-in Hall of Famer. So I would say Mattingly on that argument, but let me just make this point because I find this whole thing very distasteful. When I say a guy is not a Hall of Famer, and you get asked this as a talk show person all the time, it is not a knock to say that someone is not among the immortals. These guys were not good baseball players. They were tremendous baseball players. They were wonderful, tremendous talents as baseball players. Memorable, terrific baseball players. We have cheapened the retirement of the uniforms. They do that to sell tickets and to market jerseys and do all that. So what we have done is cheapened that. Hey, if I was doing that, the Yankees would have like 6 numbers retired or 7 numbers retired, and they're the Yankees. And I might have to stretch it to 8 or 9 because it's the Yankees if I sit down and just put together a list. Because I think Jeter should be retired. I think Mariano should be retired from the recent generation. But am I retiring all these other numbers? It's ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. Would I retire Reggie Jackson's number when he played 5 years for the Yankees? Not a chance. He played 5 years for the Yankees. I'm not retiring a guy's number when he played 5 years. When I was a kid, there were 3 numbers retired, 3, 4, and 5. And then Mantle joined them. 3, 4, and 5. That was it. And 7 joined them. And he belonged right there with 3, 4, and 5. as one of the immortal Yankees. That's how special it should be to have your number retired. You should be an absolute walk-in Hall of Famer before you have your number retired. That's how I judge retiring numbers. But it's become a marketing ploy and a way to fill buildings and have days. That's what it is. It is a money thing, but isn't everything? Isn't everything? Isn't having 10 uniforms? Isn't all the stupid stuff that goes on that is watered down the game? It's all about making a buck. It's a business. It's a big business. Bob, Max Kellerman said, and I guess Max Kellerman did an interview recently because, and I didn't hear it, or and I've seen just drips and drabs, but I guess he mentioned me in the show. Max Kellerman recently said in an interview that he was going to be your partner after you parted ways with Mad Dog. Is this true? No, it's completely untrue. There's not a word of truth to that. When Dog left, Chernoff wanted me to sit down and take time and meet a lot of people. First of all, we got hundreds of calls. Hundreds, as you can imagine. I mean, out of the woodwork, people I didn't even know. People in politics, people in comedy, people in entertainment, ex-players. I mean, from everywhere. Because the show was that big. I could tell you a little dark secret that Chernoff knew. I was never hiring anybody. That's the fact. And I knew that. The truth of the matter is, going back to the beginning, the first person I ever talked to, believe it or not, was Bill Simmons. Now, I called Bill and I said, Bill, I got an idea. And he said, I have no interest. It's not what I want to do with my life. It's not what I want to do. I appreciate it. I don't even want to discuss it. So we never even discussed it. He was the first person I talked to. He might not even remember that, but I do. Because I made the phone call. And I said, Bill, I have an idea. And he said, I'm not interested. It's not for me. I'm not interested. I said, okay. Never went anywhere else. The first person we ever met with, that I ever sat down with Chernoff with, and there was a bunch that I had lunch with, I'd say 5 or 6 or 7, because usually they would just come to Chernoff's office and I would stop in, and then someone else would be in there and I would stop in. And Chernoff used this to meet people and to get a feel for people for future reference. He says, I want to use this time and this opportunity to get to see and have a chance to talk to some of these people and get to meet them. I said, okay, even if you wind up doing nothing. And we tried to be nice to the people in the house who wanted an opportunity, but none of them were ever serious candidates. The first person I had lunch with was Stephen A. with Chernoff. I liked Max. I wanted to talk to Max, but I like I said, I never thought there was a chance I was going to hire someone. I met with Max myself for dinner near my house. And by the time I got home, it was already out that we had met, and that finished him. We never talked again. And nobody, I can tell you this right now, and this is an absolute fact, and no one can dispute this because if they are, they're lying. Nobody ever got a second interview. There never was a second interview for anybody. Number two, nobody ever got far enough to even have a discussion about being part of the show, what their role would be, or money. It never, ever came to that. That was never happened. Nobody ever got that far, and nobody was ever in line to get the show. Case closed. Ever. Nobody was ever a serious candidate. That's the fact. So I don't know what was said, but that's the facts. Exactly. Nick, Pete Carroll cannot still keep his job. The team is listless and does nothing well. I think it's going to be very hard for Pete to convince ownership that he should get another shot. He did a disastrous job. First of all, he should not have his 2 sons on the staff. Secondly, he hired Kelly as the offense coordinator, had to fire him. He drafted a running back on a team that needed so many things. He drafted a running back early on the first round into a team that had no offensive line. It has been an unmitigated disaster, and, frankly, if I was the owner, I would say, "Pete, considering your age, I think we've gotta move on." Listen, I'm not taking anything away from what Pete's accomplished in his life, but when you come back at his age, you gotta hit the ground running, and he could not have done a worse job. Roger, what do you think of Kent getting into the Hall of Fame? Um, Kent hit a lot of home runs at second base. It's a position where a lot of players haven't hit a lot of home runs. That made him a Hall of Famer, okay? He had unusual power at a position where there has not been a lot of players who hit a lot of home runs. So, Kent getting in does not surprise me. Really doesn't. Now, to me, is Kent a guy who had to be in the Hall of Fame? No. That's one of those guys that doesn't have to be in the Hall of Fame. Harold Baines does not belong in the Hall of Fame. Phil Mazeroski does not belong in the Hall of Fame. I can go down the list, okay? The Veterans Committee has cheapened the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame should be for the people who you don't even have a question of whether they should be Hall of Famers. Guys like who are on the bad list right now, like A-Rod, like Clemens, Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa. Okay, go down the list. All the guys who are in exile that are Hall of Famers. Roger Clemens, if I didn't mention him. These guys are all Hall of Famers. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, go down the list. There's no discussion. Hall of Famers should be, duh. When you are asked if someone should be a Hall of Famer, it should be, are you kidding me? That's a Hall of Famer. Somebody brought up, I think it was Bust Only, but I'm not sure, that they should let the steroid guys in. First of all, somebody said there's steroid guys in the Hall of Fame. There are absolutely steroid users in the Hall of Fame. That is without question. That isn't even a question mark. Now, people have asked me what's going to happen in the future. How is baseball going to fill this gap? And baseball needs to fill this gap. They have done a terrible job. First of all, they have not touched it because for them it's been the third rail because they were so complicit in the whole process for so many years until Waxman whacked them all in Congress. And that gave Bud religion, and Bud decided, all right, I'm gonna change everybody here now and change everything now because I don't want to be remembered as the commissioner who allowed everybody to do drugs. But he did. Now, the way this changes is this. One of the guys who is in the Hall of Fame, as he gets towards the next life, either writes a book or gives an interview and says, I was a steroid user. I'm in the Hall of Fame. Well, then the cat's out of the bag. You have one guy in there, and I guarantee you right now, I have no doubt you could put a gun to my head and I could rattle off some guys who did steroids that are in the Hall of Fame. I don't even have an issue with that. When that happens, and I think eventually it will happen, then you have the license and the bridge is open to allow all these guys who belong in the Hall of Fame and put on the bottom of their plaques they used PEDs during a time of great turmoil and terrible testing. These guys used PEDs. That's it. You know, we don't know how many years these guys, like, we don't know when A-Rod used steroids, where he didn't, when Clemens used steroids and didn't. I mean, you can draw the line where his performance hit a rut in Boston, then came roaring back in Toronto. I mean, if you want, you can see where Bonds' line of demarcation was. Okay, if you want to use performance to tell you, but you don't know that. You don't absolutely know it scientifically. You can assume it. It's a problem because it leaves a gap in the history of the game. Hey, where baseball likes to travel the road and link the past to the future with history. History is very important to baseball. Every number is very important. Records are very important. They're not as important in other sports. But there's that gap now because so many great performers have been left out. Eventually, they would like to fill those blanks in. And they can do that when they realize that some Hall of Famers who did steroids have slipped between the cracks and gotten in, and they clearly have. Uh, Ben, is Stafford the NFL MVP? I would say he is the NFL MVP. Yes. Um, unless they went into a very bad slump over the last, 4 weeks of the season, his numbers he's only had one bad turnover game, that's the game they recently lost. He had 3 turnovers in that game. He's had very few turnovers this year. He's had an incredible year. Um, they have a very good chance to be a Super Bowl winner this year. I think Stafford would get my vote for the Hall of Fame. For the MVP. And as far as the Heisman, and I voted in the Heisman for a very long time and gave up my vote finally because I just thought this sooner or later you should, if you're not going to games and doing stuff, you should eventually give up your vote. Um, I would vote Mendoza 1 and Love 2. That would be where I would be right now. I would be very surprised if Mendoza didn't win the after the last week's performance, a game watched by a lot of people. Okay. I would be very, very surprised. I have not seen now they canvass and they get a pretty good idea. I have not looked at any of the numbers as to who's leading as far as the whole thing as to who's leading and who's not and everything else. But I would think there's a very good chance that he wins the Heisman. I would say he deserves it. I really do. I'd be very surprised. I used to love the bowl season, and the bowl season now is just the playoffs. The other games are so worthless in terms of players not playing. Um, there are no bowl games that will entice you. They just won't because you don't even know who's playing in the games right up to the minute of the games. And so many of the players who have, who are the top players who are pro prospects, they don't play in the games anymore. So with that being the case, um, it's not even worth discussing. They've destroyed that. And now they have completely devalued the regular season, which was such a big part of the lore of college football. Because you think people like Texas are going to go play games at Ohio State anymore in September? What do you got in your mind? It cost them a bid. That game cost them a bid because they judged every loss the same. If that's going to be the case, why would you ever go play a game like that? Why would you ever go play a number one team on the road with a rookie quarterback? You wouldn't. There'd be no reason to because, hey, I can't gain anything from it. I gain something if I win, but if I lose, I get so destroyed by it. What's the point? So from that point, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There are some very good college basketball games on the slate tonight. That very good. I'm gonna learn a lot about Villanova playing at Michigan. I mean, Michigan has been killing people. They're number 2 in the country. Villanova lost at BYU. That's their one loss. They played well. But Michigan has beat Rutgers by 41, Gonzaga by 40, and Gonzaga is a top team. They beat Auburn by 30. They beat San Diego State by 40. I mean, 40, 30, 30, 40, 40, 30. I mean, what is going on? So I'm fascinated to see this tonight. Villanova 7-1 hasn't played a tough schedule except playing at BYU, and they lost a game there by, I believe, the final score. They lost by 2 points or 3 points in what was a very good game at BYU. They've pretty much trounced everyone else they play, but they've been playing like Penn and Temple and guys like that. They have a lot of new players, obviously a new coach. But what Michigan has done has been so overwhelming. I'll be fascinated to see what goes on there tonight in Ann Arbor. They are an 18-point favorite against a 7-1 Villanova team. 18-point favorite. Because they've been beating everybody by 20 or 30 points every game. That's crazy. That's crazy. I know a lot of you are concerned about St. John's right now. You should be. You really should be. I'm not being an alarmist. You really should be. Things have to get better, and there has to be a meeting of the minds and a real understanding of roles for the key players on this team if this is going to work. Because it's not pretty. It's not pretty at all. We'll see you later.